Hey, Kentucky, this is Mary Jo Perino. Tonight, the state's former unemployment chief testifies in Frankfort. Archive recordings give us some insight on Adolph Rupp. And I'll talk with the owners of the Moorhead Brewery entrenched in a trademark battle. All that and more is next on Hey, Kentucky. Welcome to Hey Kentucky with Jennifer Palumbo. We are finishing out our week together. We kind of dressed alike. We're just getting into the flow of things here.
I know. I'm glad I got the pink memo. And can you believe August starts tomorrow? I mean, it's just the time. It's such a strange time.
It's meaningless. I mean, August, May, who knows? And there are people who have been waiting months, by the way, to get money. So let's start with them. We begin with a return to the controversy over Kentucky's jobless backlog. The state's fired unemployment director testified in Frankfort yesterday, revealing what may have gone wrong and what caused so many applicants to go months without a check. This was the first time Muncie McNamara spoke publicly after a news report found that the Beshear administration hired him even though he had no experience with unemployment systems. His testimony caused tension and arguments among lawmakers.
I worked for the Beshear campaign. I raised money for the Beshear campaign. I gave money to the Beshear campaign. I knocked on probably personally around 1,000 doors for the Beshear campaign in and around Nelson County. So I did work for that. My family, we had a pre-existing relationship with the lieutenant governor, and it was the lieutenant governor who offered me this position. So
prior to applying?
No. I had to apply.
McNamara says some of the problems happened because the governor and others wanted to quickly extend benefits to independent contractors who wouldn't normally qualify for unemployment. He also says the rush to start accepting claims overwhelmed a computer system that should have been updated first. And Jennifer, to add insult to injury, a lot of people went to Frankfort today to do some in-person asking for their money. And someone in the Frankfort office reported COVID-like symptoms. So all those people were turned away today. Still a mess.
Yeah. And that should be the issue that they're focusing on right now. But instead, the only one Democrat was allowed to speak at this. And when she asked a question, she was cut off. So that was part of the story. But, we know these political hires are going to happen. But I think the big takeaway from this is if they're going to do that, they better make sure that person is qualified and the most qualified.
Yeah, and this may not have been the most qualified, but I will say at least he was removed from the position after it was found that he was not qualified. All right, some legal observers say leaders in Louisville need to move to prevent further action by militia groups, including right-wing militias like the Three Percenters and the NFAC, a new national black militia during the protests over racial injustice. An expert from Georgetown University who helped advise the city of Charlottesville, Virginia in preventing militia groups from returning after a 2017 rally says the militia groups are going beyond peacefully asserting their First Amendment rights. Mary McCord calls the group's activities reckless and dangerous and says local officials need to challenge them, whether it comes from the right wing or the left wing. She's also offered her legal assistance for free. And Jennifer, just even the optics of it, if I was in Louisville and I saw two sides clashing and they're both armed, I'd probably be scared for my life.
Right. And Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher has said he is open to these discussions because Kentucky law backs it up. It says no persons other than the Kentucky National Guard or Kentucky Active Militia shall associate together as an armed company without permission from the governor. So there's state law that they can use as a precedent. And then the people who say, well, this is a Second Amendment right, it's an open carry state. Supreme Court said, no, that doesn't apply here. So they need to get these groups out. And in many cases, it only escalates an already tense situation. So the Louisville mayor needs to make sure this happens.
Yeah, it certainly does escalate it. And you're right. The Supreme Court has said you can't just have a gun wherever, whenever, for whatever reason. There's still rules that apply to that Second Amendment. All right, America's conversation about race came to Rupp Arena last week as African Americans on the UK faculty called for Adolph Rupp's name to be removed. The Africana Studies Department argued that it has come to stand for racism. Now, the Louisville Courier-Journal has dug up a 13-minute interview with Rupp from school archives. The conversation took place in October of 1971, right before his final season as Kentucky's head basketball coach. Rupp spoke candidly about why he did not sign a black player until 1969, 6 years after the school lifted a ban on African American athletes, and 4 years after the football program's color barrier was broken. He explained that it was much more difficult to recruit an African American to play in the SEC, where no one wanted to be the first to break with tradition.
There was no use for us to recruit colored athletes here for the simple reason that we couldn't play them in conference competition.
At the heart of Rupp's defense is a tense relationship between himself and UK administrators. President John Oswald insisted that Rupp recruit and sign a black player even if he just rode the bench. Jen, this has popped up certainly in the last week, sparking discussions on both sides.
That's right. And I feel like at the issue of whether Rupp's name should be removed from the arena is there concrete proof that he was a racist? And in this case with these recordings, does it show that he didn't go far enough, didn't do enough? Perhaps, but is that a reason to take his name off of the building? That's the big question right now. And that, he said, people said, well, why didn't you drop out of the SEC then? That's not his call. That's the administration's call. So it shows the tensions that were there. He recruited African-American players. In fact, in one case, he had a handshake agreement with Butch Beard, Mr. Kentucky basketball. He ended up going to Louisville. So it seems that he was trying, and that is what we're learning from this conversation.
Wes Unseld was another black player he tried to recruit unsuccessfully.
Yes.
So he didn't just want a black player to ride the bench. He wanted a guy that could play. Those are two guys who most certainly could play. Now let's talk about the aftermath of yesterday's big announcement about SEC football. Leaders say they'll move to a 10-game conference-only schedule for the 2020 season. But unlike the ACC, the SEC did not release the revised schedule, which must be approved by the league's athletic directors. One Sports Illustrated writer believes the league will simply use the next cross-divisional opponents in the rotation, in Kentucky's case, LSU and Ole Miss, but is now reporting that the league will use strength of schedule to determine each team's additional opponents. Meanwhile, UK Athletic Director Mitch Barnhart says the number of fans that will be allowed into Kroger Field is still up in the air, saying the capacity will likely be determined by leaders in Frankfurt, and he'll look at how things go at the Kentucky Derby. And Jen, that might be good because that's the first weekend in September, and then they've got another 3, almost 4 weeks before that first football game, so they can see what might happen because of the Derby.
And they can also see what's happening in other football programs outside the SEC when it comes to the fans. Because it's going to be so hard, and Mitch Barnhart said, that it's not going to be 100% fan attendance, but what is it going to be? They bought themselves some time by starting the season September 26th, so they'll see how the Derby goes and then, reevaluate, but wait to see what the governor says.
If we could just be in a bubble that's working for the NBA so well, if we could just construct a gigantic bubble around Kroger Field, that'd be
Over
great.
Kroger Field, yes.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, now on Hey Kentucky, in case you missed it, a review of recent headlines. Mitch McConnell is among the group of D.C. lawmakers who rebuffed President Trump's suggestion of delaying the November election yesterday. The Kentucky senator said the election date is, quote, set in stone. In Louisville, a judge has ordered the metro government to turn over secure radio communications between police officers from before, during, and after the March raid in which Breonna Taylor was shot and killed by police in her apartment. Attorneys for her family say those conversations could determine which officers were at Taylor's apartment during the raid and if any were wearing body cameras, among other critical details. And public health and education officials have announced revisions to Kentucky's Healthy at School plan, along with other new guidance based on CDC recommendations. Up next on Hey Kentucky, I'll talk with two of the owners of Sawstone Brewing Company. We'll get an update on their legal battle with a California brewer with a similar name. Stay with us.